Hello and welcome to the Aino Bubble Dress sewing tutorial. The Aino Bubble Dress comes in two views, A and B. View A features a full circle skirt as the outer skirt, which creates a ton of volume, whereas View B features a half circle skirt with less volume but still has that puffy bubble hem. In this video, I will be sewing a lengthened version of View B. If you'd like to sew a lengthened version as well, stay tuned for my next video, which will show you how to lengthen and shorten the pattern pieces. Instructions on how to do this are also within the pattern files themselves, which you can purchase through my Etsy linked below. You will need pins or clips, your favorite marking tool, the pattern pieces cut out, matching thread, and single fold bias tape that's 1/2 inch wide. So you're going to need piece A, which is the bodice back, cut on the fold. As you can see, there's a fold line down the center. We'll set that aside for now. You're going to need piece B, which is the bodice front. It should also have the crease line down the center from where it's been folded. Make sure to also mark your dart legs on either side. Next, you'll need piece C, which is the inner skirt piece. It should also have been cut on the fold. Mine is really large, so I'm not going to open the whole thing, but just so you know, it's been folded. So there's a fold line towards the bottom of the screen, and then the raw edges are up towards the top of the screen. Towards the left of the screen is the waist, and the right is the hem. The skirt pieces can all be cut in any direction. So there's no grain lines on the pattern pieces, and that's because these are circle skirts, which can honestly be cut in any direction, whatever fits best on your fabric. Also, mine, as you can see, is really long. Again, that's because I'm doing the maxi length version. Next up, we have either your skirt D or E pieces, depending on which view you chose. So the skirt D and E pieces are the outer skirts, so you want to make sure that this is in the fabric that's going to show on the outside, whereas the inner skirt is a little less important. So you should have two of these pieces. You can just ignore these markings on mine. I messed up while I was cutting it out, so just don't mind that. But again, there should be two pieces, really big, hard to show on the screen, but you get the idea. Finally, you'll need 4 pocket bag pieces, 2 cut on the right side, 2 on the wrong side if you are using fabric that has a right and wrong side. I'm not, so it doesn't matter. Finally, we are going to mark the center front and center back neckline on both the front and back bodice pieces. To do that, just fold the piece in half, and when you open it back up, you should have a crease where the center front is, or the center back, depending on which piece you're working with, and just go ahead and lightly mark that along the neckline. For the front bodice piece, you also want to mark the dart legs, either with your marker or by snipping into them, and this is in addition to that neckline marking that we made. And then you want to mark the bust points as well and draw lines from the dart legs to the bust points. So here are those markings that I just talked about. So to do those, you want to just put your pattern piece over the cutout fabric and just mark them. To mark the bust point, you can either use an awl, or I don't have an awl, so what I do is I take a pin, I put it in there, make sure that it goes through the paper and both layers of fabric, and then I just move the paper aside and just make a little marking over there. So when you remove the paper, you can see that you have your bust point marked, you have your dart legs marked, and now you can just take a straight edge ruler and connect those lines. Do the same on the other side as well. So next we want to mark the center of our skirt C piece, which is the inner skirt. We want to mark the center hem and the center waist. So you just follow that fold line down, because again, this should have been cut on the fold. Follow it down to the hem and take your marker or your scissors and just make a little notch. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then do the same thing at the waistline. The reason we do this is because when the time comes to line this up with the outer skirt pieces, we'll be able to do that more evenly. And you'll see that later on. Next, we want to make that center marking on our skirt D or E pieces, again, depending on which view you decided to go with. This time we only need to make that marking on the hemline. We don't need to make it on the waist. So again, just fold it in half like I did here and take your marker or scissors and just mark a little notch over there. And you want to do that on both of these outer skirt pieces. So here I am doing it on my second outer skirt piece. Next, we want to mark the notches for the pocket bags on both of our outer skirt pieces. So over here I have, that's the waistline, and then down there is the hemline. And you want to just go ahead and snip into it since it's 2 layers. Again, this is your skirt D or E piece. And you can ignore this bit over here. I had to cut into my selvage a little bit. Before making your final pieces, I highly encourage you to make a toile or a muslin. You may decide once you make your toile that you want to adjust the length of the bodice or the skirt, or that you need to make a full bust adjustment, or you prefer the waist to be a little more cinched. Refer to the instructions on how to make these adjustments. I will be making another video showing you how to lengthen, shorten, and blend between sizes. So next up, we want to stay stitch the neckline and the armholes, and to do that you want to start at the top of the neckline, go all the way to the center, go a few stitches forward and then back stitch, do the same thing on the other side, and then start at the tops of the armholes and stay stitch all the way down, and make sure to back stitch. You want to do the same thing to the back bodice piece. Just stay stitch the neckline and the armholes. So we take that over to our machine and start at the top of the neckline and go all the way to that center marking that we made, back stitch. Do the same thing from the other side. Start at the top. Go down to the center, meet those stitches from before, back stitch, and do the same thing on the armholes. Start at the top and just go all the way to the bottom. Do that on both armholes. So that's one armhole done. And here's the second armhole. Now we do that to the other piece. So again, the neckline, you start at the top, go to the center, back stitch. From the other side, you start at the top again. Go to the center. backstitch, and then just stay stitch those armholes again. There's one armhole. And there's the second armhole. So now that you've done the stay stitching, you can see it along the neckline and along the armholes as well on both the back and the front bodice pieces. So just along that neckline and then along those armholes. So now we're gonna sew those bust darts. The way we do that is we start by joining up those dart legs on the raw edge of the fabric, like so. And we find that bust point and we just pin along the line that we made. Start closer to the raw edge and pin all the way down. It might take a few tries to line those dart legs up perfectly. You can see that it took me a few tries to finally get it. There we go. That looks perfect. So we put that through and you can see on the other side the way that the pin follows the dart line. And now we're going to just keep doing this. You should need about 2 or 3 pins to do the full dart. And once you get to that bust point, put one through the point. And that should be your final pin. Just make sure that everything has lined up correctly. Make sure those dart legs are lined up correctly, that the pins are going through both the top and the bottom dart legs. And now we're going to do the same thing to the other bust dart. Just a quick note, make sure that the wrong side of your fabric is facing up during this. All your markings should have been made on the wrong side. So with the wrong side facing up, you can join up these bust darts. And this is how it should look once you've done both of the bust darts. And now we can take that over to our machine and sew those. So now we want to sew down these bust darts. So to do that, you want to make sure that your needle is exactly in line with those dart leg lines that you made. So the needle should be right on top of it. It's starting at the raw edge. You want to just backstitch and then follow that line. Go as slow as you need to for this section. Just keep going down that line until you reach the final pin. And at this stage, you want to gradually sew off of the fabric. So do not backstitch, just gradually sew off of the fabric and then leave those thread tails long and just double knot those threads. So I like to take a pin to separate them because they can get a little tangled sometimes. So you want to tie it once and then tie it a second time. And the reason that we tie it like this instead of back stitching is because when you backstitch at the very apex of the bust, at the bust point, it can create a funny shape and we don't want that. So now you just snip as close as you can to those and then you do the same thing on the other bust dart. So now we want to just press those bust darts down toward the hem. Do that on both sides. And if you have a tailor's ham, it can be really useful to help shape the bust dart. But if you don't have one, you can even just do what I'm doing here, and on the right side of the garment, just kind of press into that point. Right sides facing, attach your front bodice piece to your back bodice piece. Start with the shoulders and just pin them together. Now we take that over to our sewing machine and we sew using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. So you do that to both shoulders. And then finish those seams either with a serger or a zigzag stitch and press those seams toward the back. Right sides facing, pin the side seams of the bodice pieces together. Snip away any excess overhanging fabric from those darts that we sewed earlier. Line up those raw edges and pin or clip the side seams. This is how it should look once you're done. And now we're going to take that over to the machine. So we want to sew those side seams using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And then finish with a serger or a zigzag stitch. And then press the seam allowance toward the back of the bodice. Now you want to gather your bias tape. You should have 3 pieces, 2 that are about the same length and then 1 that's a bit longer. So you want to take the right side of your bias tape and align it with the right side of your back neckline and pin that into place. You can fold the bias tape over by about 1/4 inch or 0.6 centimeters just to conceal that raw edge of it. So align those right sides together and pin or clip into place. You can use as many pins or clips as you need because this part can get a little tricky and you want to make sure you have enough security over there. And just go all the way around the neckline. And then just keep going until you meet that that back part where you had started. Pin that as well and cut off any excess bias tape that you have. So now you want to sew the bias tape to the neckline by sewing directly into that first crease from the edge of the bias tape. It's that first crease from the raw edge of the neckline and the edge of the bias tape. So just keep sewing into that crease all the way around until you reach the center back again. Press the bias tape up and away from the neckline. Be careful not to iron out any of the remaining creases that are in the bias tape. If you want, you can understitch at this step for a neater finish. Now, with all the right sides facing up toward you, take the bias tape and flip it under the neckline so that it's no longer visible from the outside. So you just want to tuck it under and then go ahead and pin or clip all the way around. Here I have the wrong side of the bodice facing me, just so that I can show you what it looks like from the underside. So as you see, I flipped it over, and now I'm going to pin it in place. While you're doing this, you want to make sure that that last crease line that's remaining is folded under the bias tape. This is how your bodice should look now, with the bias tape tucked under toward the wrong side. So this is the wrong side out. And now you just want to edge stitch that bias tape into place. So just go ahead and edge stitch all around the neckline. And then repeat steps 6 through 11 on the armholes, starting and stopping at the underarm seam instead of the center back like we did with the neckline. Do that, and then you'll have your bias facings finished for both the neckline and the armholes. So I'm going to show this to you on a different dress that I had made, just because the one that I'm working on for this video, there was something wrong with the tension on my needle. So I'm gonna just show it to you on this finished dress over here. So as you can see, the part where we overlapped the bias tape is tucked under, and that's how it looks on the wrong side. And then from the right side, this is how it should look. The bias tape should be completely concealed. So here I have my skirt C piece. Mine is really big because, as I mentioned before, I'm making the maxi length version, but you can see the curved bottom of it over here. We're gonna just fold it in half lengthwise, right sides facing each other. And once you do that, you can go ahead and pin or clip that side seam. Once you've done that, once you've pinned or clipped that entire side seam, you can take it over to your machine and sew using a 1.5 centimeter or a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and press that seam allowance open. If you're making your dress with pockets, at this step you want to go ahead and finish all the edges of your pocket bags. So that's piece F. You should have 4 of them, and you just serge or zigzag stitch all around that outer edge of each piece. Next, we're gonna attach the pocket bag pieces to the skirt. So take one of your pocket bag pieces and align the top of it with the top notch on the left side of one of your 2 skirt D or E pieces, depending on which skirt option you chose. And then do the same thing with the right side of that same skirt D or E piece. Just clip that in place and then do the same thing again with your other skirt D or E piece, and then take both pieces over to your sewing machine and sew those pocket bags in place using a 1/4 inch or 0.6 centimeter seam allowance. By the end of this, you should have 2 skirt pieces, each with 1 ear pocket bag piece at the edge of each side seam. And once you do that, just go ahead and serge or zigzag stitch to finish off that entire side seam of each skirt piece. So that should be 4 side seams that you are finishing off. And this is what it should look like. Just press the pocket bag away from the skirt piece. Do this on all 4 pocket bags. Again, we're gonna just press the seam allowance away from the piece, the skirt piece, and toward the pocket bag. So once again, you're gonna do this 4 times for each pocket bag piece. It can be a little confusing, but just know that you have 4 of these pocket bag pieces, 2 of them attached to each skirt piece. There are 2 skirt pieces for this step. Next, we want to understitch along the right side of that pressed out pocket bag seam. So next we want to take those skirt D or E pieces and lay them one on top of the other, right sides together. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew down the side seam around the pocket bag and all the way toward the hem of the skirt. So when you start, you want to start sewing at a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and once you reach the top of the pocket bag, you want to reduce that to a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And once you reach the side seam again at the bottom of the pocket bag, you can go back to using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. And I just do this because using that slightly extra bit of seam allowance helps keep the strength and integrity of the garment for longer. But if it's easier for you to just, do 1.5 all around, you can go ahead and do that. Just know that your pocket bags will be a little bit smaller. So as you can see here, I am sewing at a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. I reach the top of that pocket bag, I pivot, and then I sew at a 1 centimeter seam allowance around the pocket bag. You can go slowly at this step if that's easier for you. And again, you can just keep it all 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch, but just know then that your pockets will be smaller. So you go all around that pocket bag. You reach the bottom of it. And once again, you pivot your piece of fabric. And now we're going to sew down the rest of the side seam using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Repeat this step on the other side of the skirt D or E pieces. Again, the right sides should be facing together, and you want to just sew along that side seam, and then if you have pockets, sew around the pockets. So next up, we're going to sew our gathering stitches along the hem of our outer skirt pieces. So you want to make sure to set your stitch length at the longest available. For me, that's a 5. And start after one of your side seams. So you don't want to sew over the side seam, or else you're not going to be able to gather the fabric. Do not backstitch, and just sew a 1/4 of an inch or 0.6 centimeters away from the raw edge of the hem, all the way until you reach the other side seam. And again, do not backstitch. Leave those thread tails long. Once you have done this all around the bottom of your skirt, we want to sew our second row of gathering stitches. I'm going to do this in a contrasting color so that you can see it. And again, you want to just sew all the way along the bottom. Make sure you stop and start at the side seams. Leave your thread tails long. Do not backstitch. This second row should be 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter from the raw edge. And now I'm going to make a third row at 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters away from the raw edge. You'll see it again, it's a different color again this time. And the reason I like to do 3 basting stitches is just because you can get a nicer, more even gather. But you can do 2 if you're short on time or just hate doing basting stitches. That's fine too. So here I am doing my third row. Again, do not backstitch. Keep those thread tails long and do not sew over the side seams. So now that you've sewn your gathering stitches, you want to locate that center mark that you made earlier on your hemline. So you do that by finding your side seam and then locating that center mark. Once you do that, you can start gathering these 3 rows of stitches and just work in quarters. So go from the side seam to the center mark, and then from that center mark to the next side seam. And you want to just keep doing that. Just keep working in quarters. Just pull those thread tails that you left long. Pull it from the bobbin side. You'll figure that'll be easy to figure out because you'll just notice that one side is easier to pull than the other. So pull all 3 thread tails from that bobbin side and just keep working until you meet that center mark that you made earlier. When gathering your stitches, try to keep things as even as possible. So keep gathering and then keep kind of tugging it along with your fingers just to see how even it all is. You want to find your side seam on the other side and do the same thing. So essentially you should be doing this 4 times because again, you're working in quarters, side seam to center marking, other side seam to center marking, and then you flip the dress over and do the same thing again. Now you want to take your inner skirt piece, so the one without all of that gathering along the hem, and you want to find your quarter markings. So you do that by laying it flat like this, lining up those one is a side seam that you sewed, the other one is just a folded seam. Fold that in half again so you get a quarter, and then mark it in whichever way that you would like. So I'm just using a clip to mark each layer. So you see me marking 1 layer and 2 layers just like that. You might want to gather a little bit more or release a few gathers at this stage because the idea is that you want those markings that you made of those quarters to line up. So you want the side seam of your gathered hem to line up with the side seam of your ungathered hem. And then you want the center markings that you made to also line up with each other. So this is the side seam. And then I'm going to show you that quarter marking, and then there will be a center marking. And so you're just working in quarters. Again, you just want everything to line up so that when you sew these hems together, they fit. And again, you might have to gather a little bit more. You might have to release a little bit. Just keep checking the hems of both skirt pieces against each other to see that you have reached the required length. So again, just keep checking your distance. I'm going to check it again over here and just, mark those notches together with a pin or a clip to make things easier on yourself. And then mark those side seams. And this looks pretty good. It looks like they're roughly the same length. So I'm going to move on to the next quarter and do the same thing. And I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side of the skirt. Next up, you want to insert your gathered piece into the ungathered piece. So line up those side seams with each other so that everything is accurate, and go ahead and literally, right sides facing together, place that gathered skirt into that ungathered skirt. So here I'm putting the yellow piece inside the white piece. So you take it from the waist, you put it inside the hem of the white piece, you bring it up to the waist of the white piece. This is a lot of fabric, so I apologize if it isn't completely clear, but once you bring that in, you can line up those waists. And again, if you remember, we made markings earlier, so you can use those markings to line up the side of your waist to the side of your skirt, and then the side seam of the other waist with the side seam of the other skirt, if that makes sense. I'm sorry if it doesn't. It's much easier when you just look at it over here. Mark the sides of the waists with a pin or a clip. And then rotate your project as needed and clip the hems of both of those skirt pieces together as well. Again, use those markings that you made to guide you. So use your center pin markings, pin them together. Use your side seam markings, pin those together. And once again, you should have 4 markings along the hem in total. As you can see here, I'm just putting it all together. It kind of looks like a donut once it's all done, especially if you're doing like a shorter skirt than the long skirt that I'm doing here. Yeah, just go ahead and mark that. It's a little bit like wrangling a blanket into a duvet cover. But as you can see here now, it's looking more and more like a donut. If it's not looking like a donut to you, that's fine, whatever makes more sense to you. But the idea is that we want that yellow piece inside of that white piece with the right sides facing each other. And then we want to make sure that all our markings along that hem are lined up. And over here, I'm just adjusting one of those gathered areas just to make sure that things line up. And you might have to just keep adjusting just to, make sure that things are the same length. So that when we go to sew it together, it all makes sense. Now, once everything is aligned, you can go ahead and start pinning or clipping those hems together. So you want to clip or pin the gathered hem to the ungathered hem, go all the way around that circle. Keep going until you reach the other side. Now you can see once it's all done what I was saying earlier about it kind of looking like a donut a little bit, or I don't know if you've watched Dune, but maybe a little bit like one of those sandworms from Dune. Anyway, so this is what it should look like. You have that gathered piece on the inside and that ungathered piece on the outside, and the idea is that now we're going to sew all around this large circle. So we're going to sew these 2 skirt pieces together, and we want to hide the basting stitches that we made. I like to do it this way because if I just hide those basting stitches, I don't have to worry about going back and unpicking them after I sew my skirt pieces together. So when you stitch your pieces together, you're gonna stitch just past the final basting stitch that you had sewn earlier. So you can see here how we're gonna stitch just along the outside of that 3rd row of stitches, and you're gonna go all the way around the whole skirt. Don't forget to backstitch. As you go around, keep checking to make sure that nothing is snagging underneath. Once you're done sewing those together, instead of pressing them, because you don't want to press away those gathers that you made, you can just use the steam function on your iron and just kind of hover over it. Or if you have a steamer, go ahead and use your steamer at this step. Now go ahead and cut off those thread tails that you had left along earlier. And again, if you want, you can unpick the basting stitches, but you probably don't need to because they're just going to be hidden within the bubble that this skirt is going to create. So you can see that shortly in this next step. This is how it should look once it's all sewn together and steamed. And now what we're going to do is turn this entire thing inside out. So you can see that you have two separate skirts over here. And to me, this is the most satisfying part because you get to appreciate the bubble hem finally at this stage. Since this white skirt is the inner skirt, it's going to go under the yellow skirt. So just go ahead and push all that fabric under and bring it back out through the waist side and then line up your waists. Of course, trim any long threads that you come across along the way. It's bound to happen. It's so much fabric and we sewed so many gathering stitches. Once you bring those waists together, you want to just line up the side seams of the waist of the inner skirt and the waist of the outer skirt. You might have to give it a good shake out like you would with like a bed sheet or something, just to straighten everything out and see how it looks and to find the markings that you're looking for. Now you want to match up the side seam of the outer skirt with the side seam of the inner skirt, and then with the other side you won't have a side seam on your inner skirt, so you'll just match the side seam of the outer skirt with the notch that you made earlier on the inner skirt. Pin or clip those into place. You can choose to either leave those seam allowances open or you can push them toward the back. I decided to just push them towards the back. You might have to just get in there with your hands once you've identified the waists and just kind of adjust everything so that it's draping nicely. Make sure that the hem looks good. Just give it all a good fluff. And there you have your beautiful bubble hem of your bubble skirt. Once everything's straightened out, you'll just finish pinning those waist pieces together and sew them. Sew around the waist using a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Here you have your completed skirt piece with the waists sewn together. Now that you have this whole skirt piece together, you kind of have a new right side and a wrong side. So just for demonstration purposes here, again, I've used these contrasting fabrics. So the yellow is the right side and the white is the wrong side, aka the side that you won't see from the outside of the final dress when you're wearing it. And so you want to just flip it so that the wrong side is now facing out. So now that you have your wrong side facing out and your right side facing in, we can attach the bodice piece. You can tell this is the wrong side because this part won't be showing on the outside when you're wearing it. Now you want to flip the bodice piece so that the right side is facing out, but also so that the neckline is facing the waist of your skirt piece, and you're going to insert the bodice into the skirt piece. So the right side of your bodice should now be facing the right side of your skirt piece. Make sure that the neckline, the front neckline of the bodice, is facing whatever it is that you want the front of your skirt to be, and the back is facing the back. So if you had pushed your side seams towards the back, then that's the back. Align your side seams of your bodice with the side seams of your skirt and pin those in place, and then go ahead and just pin around the whole circle. Once that's done, you're gonna sew all around using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. I use 1.5 over here because this skirt is pretty heavy, and so I just want a nice, secure seam allowance. Once that's sewn together, you want to take it over to your serger and just finish that raw edge. If you don't have a serger, again, you can just use the zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Because you put so much effort into this, be really careful at this stage not to cut off anything. I would even recommend just not using the knife feature on your serger if you feel more comfortable without it. Once you're done sewing the bodice piece to the skirt, you can go ahead and press the seam allowance up toward the bodice. At this stage, you can even choose to just top stitch that down into place, but you don't have to. Whatever you want to do is fine. Once you're done with that, go ahead and flip the whole thing inside out, and you will have your completed bubble dress. Because I made the long version and because I am relatively tall, it was hard to wrangle on that table. So I just brought it into my bathroom and put it on a hook, and now you can see the completed dress. Congratulations, you've finished your Aino Bubble Dress. I'd love to see your version, even if you haven't finished it. So go ahead, take a photo, tag me on Instagram at RidhGoyal. Also, feel free to shoot me a message with any questions you might have over on Instagram. Again, that's at RidhGoyal. And thank you so much for being here.